Have you ever just wished you could flip a switch in your brain and instantly become productive? Well, today, we're going to break down how you can pretty much do exactly that. We're talking about a simple system to brainwash yourself into action, so you can finally get past that heavy feeling of resistance before you even start.
You know the feeling, right? You can lose hours just scrolling on your phone, and it takes absolutely zero effort. But the idea of opening your laptop to tackle that one important task, it can feel, well, impossible. So what is going on there? What's the deal?
Here's why. The mental barrier to starting real work literally feels like trying to lift a 500-pound weight. It is heavy, it's intimidating, and it takes a massive amount of initial force just to get it off the ground. Scrolling, on the other hand, that's like sliding downhill. No effort required.
And what do we usually do when we feel that resistance? We blame ourselves, don't we? We say, I'm just lazy, or I just don't have enough discipline. But what if that's not the problem at all? What if it's not a character flaw, but more of a mechanical one? You're basically trying to use pure willpower to start this massive engine that's completely cold. And that's not just hard, it's incredibly inefficient.
So, the goal here isn't to somehow find more willpower. The goal is to bypass it completely. What if you could install an autopilot switch right in your brain? A system that gets that engine running for you, automatically, without you even having to think about it. That's exactly what we're going to build. And it all starts with a surprisingly simple scientific idea.
The science behind this whole autopilot idea is actually something you've probably heard of before: classical conditioning. It's this core idea that you can train your brain and your body to have an automatic reaction to a totally neutral trigger. And of course, the most famous example of this comes from a scientist named Pavlov and his dogs. The process Pavlov used was actually incredibly simple. First, he'd ring a bell, just a neutral sound. Then, he'd bring out food, which causes a natural biological reaction. The dogs start to salivate. And after doing this over and over and over again, the dogs' brains created this incredibly powerful link. Pretty soon, he could just ring the bell and they'd start salivating, even when there was no food anywhere in sight. He connected a neutral trigger to an automatic biological reaction, and guess what? We can do the exact same thing to kickstart our work. Okay, so how do we apply this to our own productivity? Well, the first part of our solution is to create our very own personal bell. We need a specific, reliable trigger that tells our brain, with zero room for argument, that it's time to get to work.
You know, most of us try to work in these totally random environments. Sometimes it's the couch, sometimes it's the kitchen table. And all that does is confuse the brain. To beat that initial friction, that feeling we call the resistance, you need a clear, unmistakable ritual that basically screams, it is time. No negotiations, no hesitation, just go.
So let me give you a really concrete example of what this could look like. Every single time you sit down for focused work, you perform a simple multisensory ritual. For instance, you could chew a very specific flavor of gum, say watermelon, that you only chew when you're working. Then you put on a specific pair of noise-canceling headphones. And finally, you turn on a specific lamp at your desk. The key here is that this exact combination of sensations is reserved exclusively for work.
Now look, this might feel a little silly at first. I get it. But after just a week of doing this consistently, something pretty amazing starts to happen. The moment you taste that watermelon gum and hear the silence from the headphones, your brain will have built that association. It will literally begin to chemically shift into work mode before you even have a chance to think about procrastination. The trigger starts doing all the heavy lifting for you.
Okay, so having a trigger is powerful, but even the best trigger in the world isn't going to help if you're fighting against a much bigger force. And that brings us to the second super crucial part of this whole system: timing. It's not just about what you do to start, but when you do it. You have to learn to surf the wave of your own natural energy.
Think about it this way. Trying to activate your work ritual when you have absolutely zero energy is like trying to go surfing when the ocean is perfectly flat. I mean, you can paddle as hard as you want, but it's just exhausting and you're not going to get very far. The real key is to use your trigger when your own biology is already giving you a nice big push. We all have these natural high tide and low tide hours in our day. For some of us, 10 a.m. is our absolute peak. We're sharp, we're focused, we're creative. But by 3 p.m., we're a total zombie. For other people, it's the complete opposite. You need to become a detective of your own energy and figure out your unique rhythm. When do you feel awesome, and when do you feel sluggish? Once you figure out your high tide hours, you have to guard them with your life. This is your sacred time. This is for the hard, important, creative stuff. Don't waste that peak energy on answering emails or scrolling through social media. That's what your low energy time is for. Use your trigger to start your most important work right when your biological wave is at its absolute crest.
All right, let's bring this all together into the final and maybe the most important takeaway. When you combine a powerful trigger with your peak energy time, you create an incredible system. And the secret to making it all work isn't to focus on the massive project ahead of you. It's about making that very first step completely and totally effortless.
This right here, this illustrates the core mental shift you have to make. We get completely paralyzed when our goal is something huge and scary, like finish this massive project. It's just too big. So your new goal is much, much simpler. It's just start the ritual. That's it. That's your only job.
So forget about the outcome. Seriously, don't worry about writing 10 pages or finishing the entire report. Your only job is to chew the gum, put on the headphones, turn on the lamp. Focus all your energy on that one tiny action, and then just let the conditioned habit that you so carefully built do the rest of the work.
So in the end, it turns out this whole struggle for productivity, it's not really about finding some magical, infinite source of motivation or discipline. It's about building a smarter system. You don't need more motivation, you just need a better belt.